ready for this? Yeah.
Now, coming to you from the great state of Texas, it's the Cynthia Austin Show with CMA Award winner, Cynthia Austin. Now, here's your host, Cynthia Austin.
Good evening and welcome to the program. I'm Cynthia Austin. If you or someone you know has a loved one who is suffering from Alzheimer's, this is a program you don't want to miss. Author LaBena Fleming is here, and she's going to talk about her book, I Love You Always. Welcome to the program, LaBena.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to meet you.
Likewise. Your book, I Love You Always. Can you tell us what brought about this work?
Actually, I was following an inspiration that I believe was from God. My mother had dementia, Alzheimer's and vascular dementia, and I was one of her primary caregivers. And I felt led to journal the experience. I didn't want to do it, but I did it anyhow. And then after our journey was over, I felt led to turn that journey into a memoir. So that's how the book came about. Again, it was something I didn't want to do, but I felt compelled and led to do so. So that's basically how it came about. It tells the story of my mother, not only during her journey, but I felt it was important to talk about who she was before she developed dementia. Because I wanted people to see that people aren't just this disease. They have real lives and beautiful experiences before all of that is taken from them when they develop Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. And I think the more that we begin to understand that the things that are inconveniencing us, the things that make us angry, they're the disease, they're not the person, then I think we'll all do better.
Your mother, you mind telling us who she was, the kind of woman she was, and what you remember?
My mom was a self-proclaimed badass. I hope I can say that.
Yes, you may.
She was very feisty, full of life. She liked to cause trouble. From the time she was a teen, well into her 80s, that was just her personality. But she was a woman who just loved with everything that she had, with her whole heart and soul. And she was a very forgiving person. And her greatest accomplishment, according to her, was her children. And she always loved to brag about her children. But I always say she loved hard, but she fought even harder for who or what she believed in. So she was a pretty phenomenal person.
People need to hear firsthand experience of what it was really like dealing with a loved one with Alzheimer's, because a lot of times I think people, it's just a lot to deal with. It's a lot to deal with. And one of the things I noticed that you said that it's okay to lose it, that it's okay to just lose it, and people need to hear real like that.
I felt a lot of guilt, I think, at the emotions that I was feeling when I was caring for my mom. There were times that I was really tired, depressed, angry, just a myriad of emotions, and I would feel immense guilt for feeling those things. And what I came to realize was that the best we can do is the best that we can do, and that we're all human, and that it's okay to feel those emotions, but we just can't let ourselves stay in that dark place. You know, go ahead and feel it, yell, scream, do whatever you need to do, but then move on to the next thing. I wish I had done more, in all honesty. I wish I had reached out more to the Alzheimer's Association, which I didn't do. I think, as most caregivers do, you have a need to do everything yourself. I was fortunate in the fact that I'm blessed with a wonderful husband who served as my sounding board. You know, oftentimes he'd let me just cry if I needed to cry. He'd let me scream if I needed to scream. And he'd just be quiet and hold me if that's what I needed at that time. And I realized that everybody doesn't have that kind of a resource available. And that's why I think it's very important for people to reach out to the Alzheimer's Association to see what resources are available to them when they're going through this journey, because you can't do it by yourself. And I think if it were not for my faith, I don't know how I would have handled it. And I don't know how people who don't have that faith make it through these situations, because at times when I just felt like I could not do one more thing, I think it was that faith that helped me go through.
Were you going through it alone as far as being the only caregiver for your mother, or did you have support of family and friends, people who would help you with her?
I am so blessed. I had 3 brothers who were just phenomenal. And that was another thing that I think was important to include in my book, because I oftentimes hear about caregivers who have other family members that don't pull their weight, so to speak. It was actually one of my brothers, I call him Daniel in the book, who was my mom's primary caregiver. He lived next door to her, but when she reached a point where she was no longer able to care for herself or be alone in her home, then he decided to move into that home with her. So he was her primary caregiver, and then the rest of us pitched in. I retired early so that I could help, and then I had 2 other brothers. So it was 4 of us. And what I think was so special about that experience is that we all put whatever personal feelings or needs we had aside so that we could do what was in the best interest of my mother. And that was a true blessing. It didn't matter what we were dealing with, we would always try to come to a consensus with her at the forefront of all the decisions that were being made. And I know that was a blessing.
What were some of the symptoms that you first recognized in your mother when you realized that she may have Alzheimer's, or did she just go to the doctor and get a diagnosis?
No, I talk about that in the book as well. One of the things that we noticed is that we started seeing dents and dings show up on her vehicle. And she could never tell us how those dents and dings appeared. You know, she could never tell us what happened that caused that to occur. And then she started being forgetful, very forgetful. And then she began becoming accusatory. She would say that we were stealing things from her. We were having people come into her house and take things from her. So it was a lot of that type of thing. And also, she's not a complainer, and she had started to complain about aches and pains, just a lot of things that just were not normal for her. But I think the biggest thing was the things that we were noticing that was going on with her car, and then her forgetfulness and her accusive nature. Yeah.
Did you all take her to the doctor to get a diagnosis to see what was wrong, or was it one of those things she just went for an annual checkup and they saw something?
It's so funny. I worked for hospice. I retired for a hospice organization. And so a lot of the things that I would see in my mom, I knew I was seeing symptoms of dementia, but I was in denial. I did not want to accept that. And I was not aware of any of our relatives who had had that illness. So I started seeking out what other things could be going on with her that would be causing her to behave in the manner that she was behaving, and began an intensive internet search to try and find something else that could be causing the things that we were seeing. And being the doctor that I am, I decided that she had hyperparathyroidism based on the symptoms that I was seeing. And I actually took her to one specialist who did some testing, and she indeed did have hyperparathyroidism.
Okay,
And
Dr. Fleming.
Yes, it does mimic a lot of the same symptoms as dementia.
Oh.
But the only cure for it is surgery. And this particular doctor said that he didn't feel that, it would benefit her. So went for a second opinion with another endocrinologist who said, yes, indeed, this is what she had. We should do this surgery, and you could very, very realistically see some positive changes. So we went through the process of having the surgery and saw no change. And she actually got worse. So that was when, on top of all the guilt I was feeling for having her go through all of that, decided that it was good for her to see a neurologist. And that's what I think is important too. If you suspect that someone is having symptoms of Alzheimer's or another dementia, go to a specialist. You know, you wouldn't take somebody to a dentist if they're having foot problems, you know, and I think it's just really important that people seek out the opinion of a specialist when they suspect that someone has Alzheimer's or another dementia.
So you said your mom was a feisty woman. How did y'all get her out from under the driving?
That was another story in itself too. We found evidence of many accidents and other things that were going on, but my mom lost her eyeglasses. And when we took her to have an exam, it was time for her annual eye exam. So the doctor said, well, let's just do that instead of just replacing the glasses. And when he did the exam, he told her, he says, wow, he said, your vision has really deteriorated. She had macular degeneration. And he said, you really should not be driving. And she said, if my eyes are that bad, then I guess I better stop driving. And that was another blessing because she was able to make the decision. We had done things like hide her car keys, just taking her car keys away, but she would call the police on us. And the police would come and say, your mom has not been declared incompetent. Give her keys. You know, so that's what we were dealing with. And it is very difficult to get them to give up their car keys. But, you know, when you think about it, you know, here's a retired woman. She was a very independent woman. She did as much as she could for herself. The idea of losing that independence, that was just harrowing for her. I think what we all tend to do is think about how the decisions that are made are going to affect us without thinking about the impact that those decisions will have on the loved one. And that's a huge mistake.
They're giving up a lot of independence and
Absolutely.
Alzheimer's. How do you break the news to them and how do they receive it?
It was actually the neurologist that told my mom, but she never remembered it.
Okay.
That was the challenge that we had. And I think the initial diagnosis should come from the physician. You know, they're the expert. So they're the ones that should tell the loved one that they have that illness. And then it's up to us to try and help them understand. Because even though my mom was told that she had Alzheimer's, she was not really told what that meant or what to expect. And nor did she ask for an explanation of what that meant. So I think it all depends on at what stage they're at when they receive that diagnosis, how much you can tell an individual. There are some people who are diagnosed very early in the illness and are able to comprehend the information that they're given. There are a lot of bloggers right now who actually are blogging their experience having been diagnosed with the illness. And it's very interesting to see from their perspective what they're going through.
What is it that you've discovered about the Alzheimer's Association that could have helped you or that you wish you had have known?
Well, what's funny is I knew what resources were available at the Alzheimer's Association at the time. I just didn't utilize them.
Why not?
That's a good question. I think it was something in me. I'm a very stubborn person. I thought I knew a lot. And actually, I did know a lot. But one of the biggest lessons that I learned was it doesn't matter how much you know, it all seems to go out the window when you're dealing with your loved one. It just went right out the window. Oftentimes, I would hear information from the doctor, and it would be as if I was hearing it for the very first time, even though I knew I had heard it before, whether through hospice or at one of the caregiver coping sessions that I was a part of. But the Alzheimer's is just Alzheimer's Association is just a tremendous wealth of information. It talks about latest research on the topic of dementias. It talks about coping mechanisms. They have support groups. They talk about the different stages of the disease. They give you ideas of how to handle different situations, like if you're having challenges getting your loved one to bathe, or if you're having challenges getting your loved one to change clothes. It just gives you so much very useful information. And again, like I said, I thought I knew so much that I just didn't need them, but I really wished I had reached out more for the supportive services, I think, than anything else.
For the people who are dealing with a loved one with Alzheimer's and they have no help from family members, or say they're in a city, stranger to everyone, just them and their loved one, does the Alzheimer's Association provide resources for people who are having to take care of loved ones alone?
They can let you know everything that they have that would be available to you. Depending on, there's so much involved when you're talking about additional help. There's things like insurances, Medicare, Medicaid, your personal finances. So it's not just a blanket answer to that, but the Alzheimer's Association would be my first step if I were anybody dealing with that. And what I try to do in my book, not only do I tell my mother's story, I start with her journey when she was a teen, and felt it was very important to know her backstory so that you could understand some of the behaviors that you saw later in life. But I also include what I call lessons, which are a lot of the things that I've learned either during my hospice experience or during the journey with my mom. Just different things along the line of what you're asking that I like to share with the readers, you know, things that I've learned along the way that might be helpful to them. And then I also include scriptural references to show the faith component and how that gave me a sense of peace during the difficult times as well. I had intended to launch it on my birthday, which was July 28th. That was my plan. And I had done all of this extensive research online about how to set your book up to become #1. You know, I don't know why that was important. I think because I thought it would help it get the reach extend to more people. And so I just had this plan. I was going to do this day, this day, this, everything leading up to July 28th launch. And on July 10th, I was on the phone with my mentor and looking at my book because I self-published, and the button push to publish. She says she didn't push it. I said I didn't push it, but my book was published on July 10th. I had the plan for after I published the book. My book went #1 in multiple categories, probably by the 14th, I think, and it stayed in one of the #1 new release categories for 3.5 weeks. Now, had I waited until July 28th to publish my book, there were several books that came out around that time in the same category as my book, and I wouldn't have even shown. So I said that was divine intervention.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And we thank God for divine intervention.
Amen. Amen.
And I thank him for your obedience to write the book and just sharing your story, your mother's story. Getting the information out there is so important.
And I was telling someone this morning, whether it's just that one person that needed to read the story or 1 million people that need to read the story, I just had to be obedient and do what I was led to do.
And I appreciate you sharing your journey and your mother's story with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Cynthia.
You're welcome. That's going to wrap it up for this program. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to watch repeats of the Cynthia Austin Show at CynthiaAustinShow.com. And thank you once again to my guest, author LaBena Fleming. I love you always. You can go to CynthiaAustinShow.com to find out how you can get a copy of her book. Until next time, remember, love everybody the way you want to be loved and treat everybody the way you want to be treated. In the meantime, have the best day ever. God bless you.